I'm a 33-year-old office worker. My husband, Tony, is 5 years older, and we've been married for 7 years. Currently, due to certain circumstances, I live with my mother. Please ask me how I ended up in this situation. Going back 2 years, Tony and I built a house. At the time, Tony had just switched jobs, and we didn't have much in the way of savings or income. Tony's previous job was at a major corporation. However, he suffered from insidious harassment from his boss, leading to sleepless nights, and a few months later, he became unable to go to work. He consulted a psychiatrist and took a leave of absence for about 3 months, but with no signs of recovery, he ultimately resigned. After that, we managed to live on my salary alone. Tony, unemployed for 2 months, began to regain his energy. He started eating well and sleeping again, and his psychiatrist was happy about his speedy recovery. My positive, beloved Tony was back. From there, he vigorously searched for a job. His experience at a major corporation was an advantage, but due to his reason for resignation being mental health, finding a new job wasn't easy. During this time, we found a small company that needed him. His salary was about 2/3 of what he used to earn, but seeing his eyes shine as he said, "It's way better than being jobless. Let's do this," it made me happy. Moreover, it was in the field that he wanted. We wanted to have children, but it was clear that life would become difficult if I stopped working. As a result, and because I also loved my job, we gave up on having children. At the time, we didn't think about building a house as it was just the two of us. However, a cloud overshadowed our peaceful life. My mother, Karen, became paralyzed due to a traffic accident and had to live in a wheelchair. Since my father passed away when I was in middle school, Karen had been living alone. Our family home was an old house. It was far from being wheelchair-friendly, with many steps. Tony then suggested, "I'm worried, let's live together." Karen and I were surprised, but I love this kind of unexpected kindness from Tony. Tony had just changed jobs, so we didn't know what would happen, but we decided to apply for a mortgage. As expected, it was difficult to get a loan due to the short length of his current employment. But we possessed something unbeatable: determination and an unbreakable spirit, our greatest strengths. We persisted, trying out a 5th mortgage company. It was indeed difficult to get Tony's loan approved, but the loan officer proposed various options to us. We took a chance on one of these proposals, and it led to a successful loan approval. We finally decided to buy our own home. I had always dreamt of living in a house filled with the scent of wood. Thick, exposed wooden beams on the ceiling, customized storage spaces designed just for us, a kitchen adjusted to my short stature, and a spacious flooring made of cypress. Of course, it is a barrier-free single-story house. The house is perfect for comfortable living in a wheelchair. We couldn't wait for it to be completed and made a daily routine of visiting the construction site. Then, our painstakingly designed dream home was finished. It has a large yard where my mother, who had become reluctant to go out, can now enjoy sunbathing. However, there was one dissatisfaction. The land on which we built was given to us by Tony's grandfather. Tony's family wasn't particularly rich, but his grandfather adored him. But then, Tony's grandfather was suddenly diagnosed with cancer. Upon learning of his illness, he began to distribute his assets. Tony received the largest plot of land, as per his grandfather's wishes. It felt like winning the lottery, but there was a major catch. The land was just a 5-minute walk from Tony's family home. When we told them that my mother would be moving in with us, Tony's sister laughed and said, "Why is your mother moving in too? How shameless is your family! I knew marrying a strange woman like you would cause trouble." Tony's mother also snidely remarked, "Isn't it awful for my son to be dragged into caring for the elderly?
Aren't you some kind of curse?
Even during these times, Tony defended my mother and me, saying, "It's the land that Grandpa gave me. There's no reason for anyone to complain." Tony's mother and sister are quite malicious, almost world-class. I think it's a miracle that such a kind person like Tony was raised in that family. To me, he's like a beautiful lotus flower blooming out of the mud. Tony always said about his family, "I have two great examples of what not to be at home." But I'm sure the reason Tony's grandfather gave us this land was probably because he wanted us to look after his mother in her old age. He also had other properties and gave Tony's sister a parking lot located 10 minutes walk from their family home. In terms of size, it's about 2/3 of the land that Tony received. However, it already has a full parking contract, so the monthly parking lot income is significant. Personally, I would have preferred that. But you can't complain about a gift. It is something to be grateful for. In reality, thanks to my grandfather-in-law, we were able to build a house. Having no cost for the land and being able to use it as collateral for a loan made a big difference. Once the house was completed, we invited my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's family. However, during construction, we heard from the builders that they had come to see the house several times without our permission. They arrived an hour and a half later than the agreed time without any apology. "Pardon our intrusion. This is kind of like Grandpa's house, too, so it's kind of like our house as well." "Oh, such a nice house. The smell of wood is nice. No need for air fresheners," said my sister-in-law as she waltzed in. Even though her shoes were muddy because of the rain, she didn't mind at all and went straight into our newly built house. Her husband also walked around in muddy shoes, ignoring the slippers we had prepared. When I urged, "We have slippers available if you'd like to wear them," my sister-in-law laughed and replied, "It's such a hassle. You can just wipe the floor." From the get-go, the atmosphere was terrible. And, of course, they came empty-handed. After touring the rooms, they reached my mother's room. My mother's room is the most spacious and has the best sunlight. At my mother's request, we designed it like a duplex, complete with a kitchen. It's a room like a second living area. Seeing this, my mother-in-law said, "I'm fine with this room. I want to live here." An absurd thing to say. Furthermore, my mother-in-law told my mother, "You were fortunate to have that accident, weren't you? Thanks to being paraplegic, you've moved from that old shack to such a nice house. Isn't it a turn of fortune?" My mother said nothing, but she looked so sad. Inside, I was boiling over with anger. But before I could respond, Tony spoke up. "What did you just say? There are things you can and can't say to people. It makes me question your humanity. I don't even want to think that you're part of my family. You're the worst. Apologize now," Tony said in a strong tone. Whether they found this amusing or not, my mother and sister-in-law glared at me. Then my sister-in-law confronted Tony with a heated look. "What? What's this all about? That's a total turnoff. It's not cool to invite people and then treat them like that. Just because you built a house doesn't mean you can act all high and mighty." The mother-in-law joined in too. "Anyway, my son went off the rails because he ended up with a wife like you. You're a jinx." Tony didn't stay silent either. "Enough is enough. This mess started because of your rude remarks. You were saying that the accident was a good thing and calling my wife a jinx? I won't forgive you for that." The mother and sister-in-law looked frustrated by Tony's strong rebuttal. Then, my mother, who had been watching the whole scene, apologized with a regretful look. "It's okay. I'm living together with them because I actually had an accident. And it's true that I was able to live in this beautiful house from a run-down one. Your son has always been kind to me. Thank you." Perhaps feeling guilty, the mother and sister-in-law left, shooting me a nasty look. My mother then apologized to Tony. "I'm sorry. I must have upset your mother and sister. I'm sorry I ruined the mood on the day of the housewarming party, because of me." Tony also said,
No, I should be the one apologizing. It's embarrassing. They really lack decency. I'm really sorry. But I am happy to be living with you. Please understand that."
With that, my mother started to tear up. Since it's near Tony's parents' house, the neighbors are all people we know. They've all known Tony since he was a child, so they're very kind to us. 4 months have passed since that mess. When we were finally getting used to our new home and my mother started to smile more, an incident occurred. I received a call from home while I was at work. We rarely get calls from home, so it startled me. My bad feeling came true. My mother, unable to hide her agitation, called me. "It's awful. Tony collapsed at work." I, too, was agitated by this serious tone. I immediately consulted with my boss and headed to the hospital. On the way, I tried to remain calm by unconsciously imagining positive scenarios like, when I get to the hospital, he'll be all right, and joking around to keep me in good spirits. But when I arrived at the hospital, I couldn't believe my eyes. My husband, who was supposed to have gone to work cheerfully after eating breakfast as usual, we were supposed to have a movie date this weekend. But now, what I see is him, with countless tubes connected to his body. I was completely lost. The doctor said he's in a very dangerous condition. Even if he survives, we don't know if he will regain consciousness. I felt as if I was in a movie. I couldn't even cry. I prayed fervently, yet my prayers went unanswered. My husband, Tony, passed away just like that. In my state of shock, my mother and sister-in-law showed up as expected. When they heard Tony had passed away, my sister-in-law aggressively asked, "Did you poison him or something? Were you after his life insurance money?" Following suit, my mother-in-law cornered me too. "Bad things always happen when you're around, just like your mother. You really are a jinx." I was so sad I couldn't speak. Just then, my mother arrived in a caregiver's taxi. She was crying at the circumstances of Tony's death. Seeing my mother in tears, I was finally able to cry as well. As the two of us sobbed loudly, my mother-in-law said, "Oh, stop it! Can't you quit the fake crying? My son changed after meeting you two. Now that my son is gone, I don't want to see your faces ever again. Don't appear before us again." And then she left the hospital. From there, we had a funeral director come in and arrange the schedule for the funeral. We headed to the funeral home. Tony's cause of death was a subarachnoid hemorrhage. I can't believe it. He was fine until morning. When I informed my mother-in-law about the funeral schedule, she replied unexpectedly, "He's always sided with you two, so I won't attend the funeral. My daughter won't come either." Many people from Tony's company and his friends attended the viewing. However, neither my mother nor my sister-in-law and her husband were present. It's unbelievable, but maybe that's just the kind of people they were. Many people attended the funeral too, and I could tell that Tony was loved by many. There were many who shed tears for his untimely death. I was glad to spend the whole day with them who sincerely missed my husband. I had received an email from my mother-in-law after Tony's death, but its content was inappropriate, so I didn't reply. The email was asking about the amount of life insurance money. She kept emailing because I hadn't replied, and eventually said, "I have a right to receive it." I wasn't in a position to deal with it, so I ignored it. When we arrived at our house, I saw a light seeping out of the room. My mother, Karen, looked puzzled and said, "That's strange. I thought we turned off all the lights. Maybe I forgot to turn it off because I was too agitated." I replied, "That's all right. It's only natural to be upset given the situation," and unlocked the door to our house. Sure enough, we could hear the sound of a TV coming from inside. Definitely weird. My mom and I exchanged glances, then fearfully entered the room. There, sitting in the room, were my sister-in-law and her husband. "What are you doing?" I was so surprised that I couldn't even raise my voice. The living room was filled with unfamiliar furniture
and boxes. We had absolutely no clue what was happening. My sister-in-law then said, "Why did you just barge in here?" "Well, it's your first time, so I'll let you off the hook. We're taking this house. We sold your stuff, so leave." My mother and I were utterly stunned. We had no idea what was going on. When I asked, "Where did our stuff and furniture go?" she nonchalantly replied, "We had a resale company come today and they took everything. You had some pretty good furniture. We got a good price for it. We bought this furniture with that money. Who wants furniture that a dead person used? It's bad luck, isn't it? I'm the type to care about such things. Your stuff is packed in these boxes. I don't know if you're minimalists or just poor, but it was a relief that you had so few things." The furniture was carefully chosen by my husband. I absolutely couldn't forgive them. My mom was also furious, her face turning beet red, but she was too shocked to reply. I immediately called the resale company. After explaining the situation, they agreed to treat the items as stolen and return them. Honestly, now that my husband is gone, I want nothing to do with his family. But I do feel a desire to stay in the house filled with memories of him. As I was struggling with these feelings, my mother said to me in a voice only I could hear, "What do you think Tony would say if you were here now? Maybe he'd say we should leave?" I'm sure that's true. Tony always used to say, "It's worth spending time with people who understand you, but there are also people who just won't get it. No matter how much you explain, it's a waste of time dealing with those low-level aliens." He was, in fact, talking about his mother and sister. I can see it clearly now. If we continue to live here, his family and relatives will keep interfering. I impulsively signed a lease on an accessible apartment. My mother was taken aback by my decisiveness. I asked the resale company to keep the furniture for a few days, and it was moved to the new apartment 3 days later. In exchange for moving out, I made the mother and sister-in-law promise to cut ties with us. And so, a new life began with just my mother and me in the apartment. It seems that Tony had so many life insurance policies, it was almost obsessive. Tony often joked, always with a smile, "When I die, you guys will be rich." True to his word, my husband left my mother and me enough money to be comfortable for the rest of our lives. He was unable to secure a mortgage when we bought the house, so, being an employee at a major corporation, I purchased the house under my name. I ensured that, even if something happened to Tony first, I certainly wasn't stupid enough to continue paying a mortgage for a house I wouldn't live in. Under the original contract, the house would be auctioned off if the mortgage wasn't paid for 3 months. In the hustle and bustle of life, 3 months passed in a flash. Then, I received a barrage of calls from my sister-in-law, Jessica, with astounding fury. My call history was filled with Jessica and my mother-in-law, Linda. "What the heck? This is seriously scary. It sounds like something out of a horror movie." I thought it was a little horror movie. Since they were being incredibly persistent, I picked up the phone only to find out they were furious that the house was being sold. Apparently, when they returned home, they were unable to get in, and there was a seizure notice. Jessica and her husband moved out of the apartment they had been living in since Tony passed away, and Jessica had also quit her job. I suggested they move back into their parents' house since they were panicking about suddenly being homeless. To my surprise, Linda had become so involved in gambling that she couldn't keep up and had sold her own house. It seems they had been living together for the past 2 months. From what I hear, they even sold their primary source of income, a parking lot in front of the train station, a long time ago. Now, Linda and Jessica's family are completely homeless. When Linda said, "I'm sorry for everything. Let's get along. Can you lend me some money, please?" I replied, "I think it's best if you stay away, since I'm a jinx. We're strangers now that we've severed ties." Linda fell silent after mumbling a weak, In my mind, I was laughing, thinking, who's the real bad luck charm here? Then, when I said, "I won't lend you a single cent," Jessica, who had been listening to the conversation next to Linda, shouted, "You devil! Bring us the money right now!"
I am a devil and bad luck, so I'm going to hang up now, I replied and ended the call. In truth, I had a lawyer involved for the past 3 months, pushing for the auction of the house. I thought it was an unusual case, but apparently it's not that uncommon. The house was sold without any major trouble, allowing our family a moment of respite. We planned to find a new home with the money Tony left us. Given it's just my mother and I, we don't need a big house. We'd rather prioritize security as 2 women living together. And so, I chose a condominium with minimal noise disturbance. I remember something my husband always said when we built our home.
People can get energy from the sun, so let's create a place where the mother-in-law can enjoy her hobby of reading in the garden without feeling self-conscious.
With those words, he had made a spacious courtyard for her. So I looked for a condo with a large balcony where she could enjoy her coffee and read. It's smaller than our previous home, but the room is spacious enough to house the furniture my husband proudly chose. The piece of land that was gifted to us by Tony's grandfather was expansive, and the house sold for more than expected. With that money, I bought a rather luxurious condominium. The security is top-notch, so my worrywart husband would surely rest easy. And I heard rumors about my in-laws' family. Our old neighbors were worried about my sister-in-law's family suddenly moving in. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law's family were left homeless. They even tried to borrow money from neighbors. In the end, they couldn't borrow anything and ended up living in public housing after consulting with the community. But they're stubborn people, so it seems the trouble never ends. From what I've heard, they caused a commotion by having a barbecue on their small balcony. Their thoughtless actions must have shocked the locals. And whether it's due to a lack of money or just frustration, they seem to have loud arguments every night. People are saying they're causing such a racket that it sounds like things are being thrown around. My sister-in-law's husband left a long time ago, and now it's just her and Linda living together. It's quite the contrast to my peaceful life with my mother, although we're both 2-member households. It seems that the neighbors are banding together to try to get this nuisance family evicted. No matter where you go, if you're a nuisance, people won't welcome you. And what goes around comes around. I just want to live peacefully and quietly, estranged from my embarrassing family. I believe that Tony is surely watching over us. From now on, I plan to live my life without causing trouble to others, and do my best to live not just for myself, but for Tony as well.